This lesson is on measures of dispersion. Within the word dispersion, you can hear the word disperse. Disperse means to spread out. If a crowd is dispersed, the crowd is spread out. Therefore, measures of dispersion tell us how spread out a data set is, or how spread out the numbers in a data set are, or how different the numbers in the data set are. That's what measures of dispersion tell us. In this lesson, we're going to discuss two measures of dispersion. We're going to discuss the range and the standard deviation. There are many other measures of dispersion, but our lesson shall be restricted to those two measures. First of all, let's talk about the range. The range of a data set is the difference between the largest number or score in the data set and the smallest number or score in the data set. So that tells us the spread of the scores from the highest to the lowest. If we let x sub L be the largest score and x sub S be the smallest score, the range of a data set is x sub L minus x sub S. It's the largest score minus the smallest score. For example, suppose that a pharmaceutical company has two different processes for producing sodium chloride. In its R&D department. And of course, R&D stands for research and development. And let's say that for the first process, the grams of sodium chloride produced from 4 different experiments are 20 grams from the first experiment, 25 grams from the second experiment, 20 grams from the third experiment, and 23 grams from the fourth experiment. And let's call this data set 1. This is the first data set from the experiments with one of the processes for producing sodium chloride. And we want to find the range of the data set. We want to determine how spread out these numbers are, or how spread out the experiments are or were in terms of producing grams of sodium chloride. So of course, one way of determining how spread out these numbers are is to find the range. So for this data set here, the range would be equal to the largest score, which is, what would the largest score be in the data set? Right, 25, which is the largest score in the data set, minus the smallest score in the data set, which is what? Right, 20. So the range in this case would be 5. That's the range for this data set. The range in the number of grams produced in these 4 different experiments. Now let's suppose that we have another data set, and we'll call it data set 2, and it's for this another process that this R&D department uses to produce sodium chloride. And let's say that this process produces 2 grams of sodium chloride on the first experiment, 26 grams on the second experiment, 10 grams on the third experiment, and 50 grams on the fourth experiment. And let's say that we want to find the range or how spread out. We want to find a measure of how spread out these numbers are, these different numbers of grams of sodium chloride. We want to find out how spread out they are. So the range is one way of talking about the spread of a data set and how spread out the numbers are in the data set. So to get the range this time, we're getting the range is telling us the difference between the largest and the smallest score. And the range in this case, the largest score, as you can see here, would be what? Right, the largest score would be 50, minus the smallest score in the data set, and that is what? Right, 2. So the range for this data set would be equal to 48. That would be the range of this data set. So you can look at the 2 data sets and you can compare the 2 data sets, and you can compare the 2 processes that were used to produce the 2 data sets, the 2 different sets of grams of sodium chloride. And you can make a determination as to which method is more consistent. And it appears that the first method is more consistent based on the range, because you have a smaller difference between the largest and the smallest score. For the second set of experiments, you have a larger variation there as far as the spread, how spread out the numbers are. 48, that's the range. So there's a larger spread there for that second data set. So this is the range, this is how the range works, and this is how you can use the range to describe a data set. When you have a data set, a large set of numbers, you need to find some way of summarizing that set of numbers so that you can talk about it in an intelligent way. And the range enables you to do that as far as talking about how spread out the numbers are in a data set. So it is a measure of dispersion.